Yeah, I welcome Nick Jennings from San Francisco, but living in Europe, I think. in Prague? Ah, okay. Imagine a world where your web applications are independent and not on rental. So, Nick is talking about autonomous web apps with Sockethub. Yeah, it's an idea of using social media not over middleman platforms, I think, if I understood. And yeah, very looking forward to his input. Nick.
Hello, my name's Nick, and today I'm going to be talking about Sockethub and the idea of building applications to be more autonomous and future-proof, and also kind of protecting your rights at the same time. So first, a little bit about myself. My name's Nick Jennings. I'm an open source developer. I've been involved in open source for a long time, over 10 years, both either professionally or just as a hobby. And lately I've had the good fortune to be working on the future of web applications, giving it a lot of thought and developing solutions. But before I begin, I just wanted to kind of address what actually a web application is, because I think the term is confusing. Some people consider it more of a mobile thing. Others, it could be in the browser. Wikipedia, the definition from Wikipedia means kind of everything is a web app. Even a news site is a web app. Anything that is in the browser and has some sort of functionality is a web application. So really, in this day and age, web apps are everywhere, and everything is essentially a web app. So, with that said, web apps are clearly the future of computing. And to me, I think when this whole trend started, I guess maybe 5 years ago, it became really popular, and people were really excited about web apps. And I was excited too, but I was also kind of nervous about it, because most web apps that we use are controlled, obviously, by companies, and the idea was that everybody is on a dumb terminal accessing the web, and these companies provide you with the applications. Everything's in the cloud, so you kind of are giving up your freedoms in a lot of ways. So there are a lot of people, not just me, obviously, and Frank's presentation was addressing the same issues. So consolidation of the web is something that has been happening quite a lot lately, especially in regards to social media platforms like Facebook and Twitter. If you think of like an email service, you send an email, it goes from your server to the target server, and that's it. But with social media, everybody has to join these internal networks, essentially, to send messages to and from each other. And that's really what I'm going to be focusing on today, is the messaging and communicating with people on the web. Another really bad thing about most applications we use are the terms of service. I don't know how many of you actually spend the time to go and read the terms of service. I'm willing to bet most of you don't. I don't. Usually we don't read these things. And as a side note, shameless plug, I have some friends who are working on trying to help users to get an idea. They grade various platforms on their terms of service, so you get an idea of how controlling a platform can be, like Facebook or Google. So another big problem with web applications, traditional web applications, are that these companies can revoke your access at any time. The web application, you might have paid for it, you might buy content through that web application, but generally speaking, the terms of service allow them to revoke everything at any given moment. Could be a business decision, or they go out of business, or they get bought, or any number of things. So here's an illustration. You have company A that makes the next best web app, and everybody's excited, everybody's happy. But then company A goes out of business, or company A gets bought. Suddenly, applications stop working, and everybody's sad. This is not how I want the future of applications to work for me. The computer basically kind of just refusing to load whatever application you bought. So, yeah, in this kind of bleak future, your online presence is dictated by private companies. I think we can all agree that that's not a really good future, and we need to take steps to avoid that. That said, we all also probably agree that web apps are pretty cool. They're extremely useful. They can be accessed from any device. They can be accessed from any platform. And also, for developers, you suddenly have a much wider audience. Previously, there's Windows developers, Linux developers, Mac developers, and now we have a new platform that everyone can use, and we have a common language and tool set. It's actually quite awesome, and there's a lot of really amazing potential there. And obviously, web apps are here to stay, and we should do our best to make them awesome. Now, yeah, so we need to do more to protect our autonomy in this regard. I'm obviously not the first person to get up here and say these things. There are a lot of people that have tried stuff in the past. And I'm not going to go into any specific attempts, but I do want to focus on distributed social networks. These are groups that have been working to provide alternatives to Facebook and Twitter. And generally speaking, they're open source alternatives, and they're federated, meaning, like I was saying before, you don't have that consolidation or that network congestion, which is a really good thing. I think that design is great. We want to be more independent on the web and not rely on these corporations to provide us access to doing things. And one of the problems with distributed social networks historically has been the protocol APIs. I don't know how much you guys know about it, but it's kind of almost political in a way. There are so many different protocols and either open standards or companies inventing protocols that as a developer it becomes very difficult to write an application that integrates with everything nicely unless you want to spend a lot of time implementing all the different protocols, fixing it when they change, interfacing with Twitter, Facebook, any of these distributed social networks. It can be a nightmare. Another problem, I think, is kind of the speed in which these distributed social networks have been moving. They're trying to develop everything, the full stack from the ground up. And here's just a very general idea of what I mean by that. You have the data, protocols, application logic, and the user interface, and these people are trying to develop the complete solution to the problem, which is a noble effort, but I think it's just taking on too much. You can't compete with Facebook in that way. You can't stay on the cutting edge of the user interface while trying to do things the right way and keep everybody happy. And I would say that probably the major problem is network effect, which is why most of these social networks, distributed social networks, have not caught on yet in a large sense. You need a critical mass of users before they become useful at all, really. So I think that with that in mind, there's a new approach which a small group of people and I have been working on, and the general idea is the idea of an unhosted web app, where you kind of take this full stack approach and you break it up, and you turn the backend services or the backend logic into services that a user can subscribe to and are not directly coupled to the application. So, for example, here you take this top area would be what's in the web browser. You have the HTML, the JavaScript, and all of the app logic there. And then you have these generic services that the user can define to be used by the application. Now, I'm not really going to go into the data side. I think that Frank did a great job of kind of talking about that. There's another project which is also might be part of OwnCloud eventually, but it's called Remote Storage. And if you get a chance, I recommend checking that out. But what I'm going to talk about is more about the protocols that are involved, specifically in regards to messaging. That's what Sockethub is focusing on right now, is being able to message people on various platforms without having to go and be a part of those platform networks. So what exactly is Sockethub? Well, Sockethub is a server that, or service that runs on a server, and it communicates via WebSocket right now, although it could communicate in a number of ways in the future. But the basic idea is that it's a polyglot messaging service. Polyglot meaning being able to speak many, many different languages. In this case, APIs and protocols, internet protocols. The basic concept here is that we're not picking winners and losers. We're not saying this open protocol is better than this closed protocol, and therefore we're only going to be using this, and you just kind of screwed if you want to talk to your friends who are on Twitter or Facebook. Just to give you a basic overview of Sockethub, this is very basic, but you have your web application, which is independent. Then you send these generic messages to the Sockethub instance. The Sockethub instance will take that message and get the job done, whether that's a message intended for Facebook or Twitter, an email message, or an XMPP message. These are just what we're starting with. The message gets delivered, and you get a response back to your application. So what do the messages look like? Here's an example. I don't know if you can read that, but it's a very basic example of someone sending an email. So in your application, JavaScript, you just make a JSON object and you send it via WebSocket. This specifies the platform, which is email. What you want to do is the verb, that's send, the to and from addresses, and the body of the message. So with that, you can go ahead and send an email to somebody. Now, there are credentials, obviously, that are involved before this step, but I'm not getting into that for this talk. But it's the same process. You just set credentials using a JSON object. Here's an example of sending a Facebook message. The object looks almost the same. You're just using a different type of username, which is the Facebook username instead of an email address. You're specifying that you want to send it to Facebook. So with this way, your application is not involved at all with any of the protocol specifics. So you could imagine 5 years from now, who knows whether we'll be using Facebook and Twitter. I mean, probably will, but who knows? And there could be many other things that have become popular since then. The only thing that has to change really are a few lines maybe to specify a new platform and a new platform developed for Sockethub. So a little bit more in depth about the way Sockethub works. I'll try to just give a brief overview. The web application sends the message through a WebSocket, and it's handled by a dispatcher who validates the JSON, handles all of that, kind of making sure everything's okay, and it gets put onto a queue. And down here, the platforms is really the kind of the focus. All of these are extremely modular, so anyone could come and add a platform for a new service that they want to interact with. These are handled in a very abstract way. So a message is sent to the platform, and the platform has the ability to send a response back or send new messages back, and they're all routed back to the web application. So the idea here is that I don't know if you're familiar with the term backend as a service, but it's the idea that the user is The user defines where they want to host their data. So they could choose something like OwnCloud to host their data. And in this case, they could choose what server they want to handle all of their messaging. This could be their own personal server, could be a company that provides Sockethub as a service. But the key is that the application doesn't have to implement all of that backend logic itself. So if you go back to our previous example here where everybody's sad because their favorite app doesn't work, if these apps were developed with this architecture in mind, one of these users could install Sockethub on a personal server. Suddenly their app, they just point their app to the new server and it works, and they're happy. And likewise, a business interested person could set up a service and provide a small subscription fee for users to sign up with. And that way, other users that don't have their own server can also be happy and their apps can run. So in this way, the app lives longer than any one company, and we kind of return to the idea that the app is something that we buy or we don't, but it's something that we choose that we want to use. We want to make that better, and we want that app to live on beyond the lifetime of one company, because companies get bought all the time, business plans change. So what can be done with Sockethub right now? Some examples would be an instant messaging application. You could write platforms for not just XMPP, but also MSN or AIM or ICQ or anything you wanted. An email application. Right now, we really don't have any ability to write an autonomous email application. They're all tied to service providers. Gmail is, you're locked in. The application is served from Google, and that's it. So in this way, you could write actually an email application that is a web app that can handle SMTP, POP, and IMAP via Sockethub. RSS reader. We all know like Google Reader recently closed their doors. So this is a perfect example of why this is important for the future. If we design our apps to be more robust, we can migrate away from servers that are being closed down. And also, you could implement something like a social networking console. A TweetDeck, I guess, was something that was big. So something like that. And like I said before, platforms are extremely extensible, so you can add a platform. The benefits are primarily it's a lower barrier of entry for developers. If you have an idea for an application, you could focus on just building that app, and you don't have to worry about setting up a bunch of servers if you don't want to. If you're a startup, you could do that, and you could abstract the whole thing behind the scenes. But the idea is that open source developers can just write apps for Sockethub, and they don't have to have a server that's doing the work, which is often the case these days. Another big benefit is that it's not completely addressing what distributed social networks are trying to address, but it is in the same area, and it's not affected by the network effect. One person could write an app, and it's immediately effective for that person. There's no need for everyone to join in and participate in the revolution. It's directly proportionate. Like, if I use it, it's 100% effective for me. It's also practical. Both private businesses and open source developers can use this as a tool in their toolbox without having to get everyone else involved in the idea. So, are there any apps? Right now, Sockethub is about 4 months old, and it's pretty stable at this point. We're working in parallel on a messaging client called DogTalk, and they're both not ready. They don't have a stable release yet. I would say DogTalk is kind of an alpha state. You can send and receive messages. Everything's working in that regard, but it's not feature complete. If you're interested, it's the GitHub link. Sockethub itself. We've got these platforms already under progress. They're not completed yet, but this is kind of the first batch that we're working on. and many more planned. This is just an idea, but it's really up to also what people are building and what takes priority in that way. So in conclusion, I think kind of the main point of the talk really is that I personally, as a developer, I think it's important to write apps for the future and to think of the app, the lifetime of the app, outside of the lifetime of a server farm for your company or something like that. If you're a startup, I think it makes a lot of sense in the future for us to have more control over our applications, for users especially, to expect it, to expect autonomy, to expect to have the control and reserve the rights. And yeah, I think that's very important. So if you're interested, this weekend actually in Berlin, we're having a meetup or talk more about this. We'll probably do some coding and some more presentations and just kind of, get an idea of what people think. If you're interested, you can go to sockethub.org and there's more details there. And that's about it. Here's contact information if you need to get a hold of me. And if there's any questions, I can answer them now. Thank you. No questions?
Are there any questions? Take the chance to have the expert here. There's one. Sorry.
Hi.
Hi.
Thanks for your talk. I have a question. Web app can be a website. When a web app is unhosted, where do I host? Where do I put my media assets? Where do I put the CSS files? And where do I host the web app?
Right. Well, I wasn't really focused on data, but the remote storage project is actually more handling that side of things, what to do with the user data or the site data. And in the case of a website, it might not make the most sense. We're mostly focused on the application as a tool, but it can be done as well. I recommend, if you're interested, looking into remote storage, and we have a mailing list, and people are talking about this actually right now, so.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Any more questions, comments? Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, if this